Hello. In this video, I'm gonna talk about or walk you through my Emacs initialize script, or basically my .emacs or .emacs.d/init.dl. So basically my init.dl file. So let me just zoom in the font a bit, and I think it's good now. So I have been hopping back and forth between NeoVim and Emacs for a long time. For actually now it's some years, maybe 2 or 3 years, that I'm hopping back and forth between using Emacs as my IDE and development environment and using Vim. And I recently came back into Emacs to try out some new stuff that has been going on in Emacs. Especially, I wanted to test the native compilation that was actually available for some time now, but I did not try it on my Mac, so I wanted to do this. And also some new packages that has been arrived, like eglot is now inside the core Emacs, or basically eglot is an LSP client, and it's now been included in the core Emacs distribution. So if you install Emacs 29 of course, which is not released yet, but if you build from source, or if we wait for the official Emacs 29 release, and then we can see we can use eglot without any installation as a core part of Emacs. So let me walk you through of my Emacs configuration. So the first line you see in here is for debugging this script itself. So if I have any errors, any problems with the code, I would turn this line on, or basically uncomment this, and it will give me a debug trace or the stack trace of the error in a window. So I can then debug what caused the issue. So first part is this part, which is early-init.dl. Early-init.dl is a file that is a separate file than the init file, and it starts, I think it will get sourced and get evaluated before the UI elements of Emacs try to actually load. So it's a good place to actually disable some toolbars, some scroll bars, and these kind of stuff. Also disabling the default package manager, because we are going to use a third-party package manager which is a lot better than the default one. Also, we are going to increase the gcconst threshold variable. So what is this gcconst threshold variable? Emacs, as we all know, is not just an editor. Maybe I actually create a video on this concept, but Emacs is more a programming language plus a runtime library and some UI and a UI framework. So you should not look at Emacs as a text editor. It's actually not the correct way to see it. And the gcconst threshold variable controls that, okay, we have an Emacs process, and Emacs itself has a VM that executes elisp, and that VM that executes elisp have a memory or has a memory, and this memory, when reached a certain point in size, would trigger a gc call that will come and remove objects that are not being used anymore. It's actually a really common pattern in managed languages. So C# has the same thing, Java has the same thing, Python has the same thing. All managed languages have the same thing. Golang has the same concept, and Emacs has that also. By default, I think I can show you. By default, this variable original value is around, this is 8 kilobyte. You see it's 8 million bytes, which is 8 kilobytes. um, and but the value we set it to, it's around 100 megabytes, because 8 kilobytes by today's standards is really low, and it's really not sane to have your garbage collector run for every 8 kilobytes of memory for every time you reach 8 kilobytes. And it's really annoying, especially when you're using an LSP client, because the messages that LSP client sends to a server and receives the response and tries to deserialize that JSON response into some Emacs data structure. Some Emacs data structure is really large, and these 8 kilobytes will get full so soon. So we increase that to improve the performance and less lags when using LSP. There is also a similar variable in here called read process output max. So it basically means if Emacs start a sub process, which is a really simple thing, you can do this using meta. I will go through all the spawning process in the end of this script, but for now let's just spawn a script. So we spawn a process. So if we just do meta and shift and number 7, which is basically meta and ampersand, it prompts me for a shell command. I use figlet and say hello. Let's do hello world. And if I run this, you see it spawns the process and just prints, or basically puts the output of that process in another buffer. So the way Emacs reads that from the output of the process, or the std out of the process, the way it controls how many bytes each time it should read is using this variable. And the default value for this variable, okay, there is no default value for this. I don't know what's the default value for this, but it is recommended to set this to a rather large number. For example, this is 1 megabyte. Actually, that's wrong. This is 1 megabyte. So if you come down, so this is for basic stuff, and we put this in early init file. So if you take a look at early init file, I have the same thing in here. But I put this in here as well for the sake of documentation, and people just want to copy one script. I really like my configurations to be one file, because I think if I want to reference some people to that config and tell them, okay, just go and grab this script and put that in this file, it's simpler and less magical for a person to get this script, instead of I can put every single part of this script in a separate file. And maybe that's actually more organized, but I prefer this way because I think scripts or config scripts should be copyable and understandable for new users. So we go to second part, which is installing a package manager. And for package manager, Emacs has an internal package.el. So if we take a look at package initialize, for example, package initialize is a autoloaded function. You call this to initialize the package manager of Emacs. And it's defined in the package.el file, which is distributed with Emacs. But we don't use this because of certain problems with package.el. The first problem with the package.el file, the package.el package manager, is that it loads all packages it installs, even when you don't use them. So let me show you something. So if you go to straight folder inside it, I'm using a straight, so there is folder called straight. Of course you can control this, the name of this, but the default name is a straight in your Emacs directory. You see there are some repos that it cloned for me. These are all plugins or packages I installed. There is a similar directory for package.el, which is called elpa. The problem with package.el is, the first problem, is that it will load all packages in LPA directory. So it would not respect your configuration or the packages you actually want to use or load. This is not the case with straight.el. Straight.el will just load the packages that you defined or that you set to be loaded. This is the initialization script of the straight.el, which basically checks if the bootstrap file in your current Emacs directory is not present. It will download that using, I think it's a rather simple file downloading thing, and put this in a file, and that's it. This is I don't use package anymore, so I can basically remove this file, this line, but it's not important for now. So then I install all packages I want. There is a way of using something called usePackage macro, which is again now distributed by Emacs, and it's a declarative way of defining all the packages you want and all the configurations, bindings, and many things, and also defer the loading of those packages. I don't use usePackage as well because I don't like the way that it is so magical, and I think it abstracts many things about Emacs core functionalities that for new users, maybe new users think that there is no other way of mapping a key except the bind part of the usePackage, or there is no other way of adding a hook. Where is the hook thing? Of adding a hook other than the usePackage hook. Or people won't be familiar with auto mode alist, which is a variable that basically defines what mode Emacs should load for a certain file type. So let me show you actually that variable, auto mode alist, and you see it's a mapping between all the formats that my Emacs can handle. So for example, for Go, for .go file, this is a regex pattern, use Go mode. For go.work file, use go.work mode. For RS files, use Rust mode. And there are many other things. So the problem with usePackage is that it abstracts things very much that I don't like to use it. I rather have a linear and flat configuration, and to make each line do mostly one thing, or each expression actually do mostly one thing. So for example, in this expression, I'm basically defining a list of packages. So I'm saying, okay, I want the Hydra package, which I will show you what is that. I want the helpful, GCMH, and many packages. So, and let me tell you, let's actually move on. We will see all of them basically in action. So let's come down. These are all the packages I install, and I do a rather simple thing. I do a mapc, which is a variation of map function, which basically applies a function or a lambda, basically a function, over all elements of a list. You probably have seen the map function in other programming languages as well, like JavaScript or Python. It's the same thing in here, and there are two variations of map function I want to show you. There is a mapc and mapcar or char, which are defined in Emacs. The difference is that mapc will not produce any value, and it's mostly used when we want to apply a function to a list, to all elements of a list, just for the sake of side effects. So for example, in here, I'm not doing anything with the output I just want to install packages using the function straight use package, which is basically the straight way of telling the straight, okay, install this package if I have not already installed it. So we come down, we have some customizations of the core Emacs stuff. So I define my name, my email, I define a font. This is not an Emacs font. You see, this is amireza/font because it's a custom variable, and I do so, and I will use this variable and this font size together to set the font. We will see it down below. And I have other fonts commented out, but I use Fira code for now. I also set the Amireza theme variable, which I will use later in this script to set the default font. JBlow is a theme, is my custom created theme, which is basically a theme derived by, let me zoom in, which is a theme I derived from Jonathan Blow streams. I can actually show it to you now. So JBlow theme, if I load, okay, sorry for the white splash. It's a rather green theme that I actually like a lot. But for the sake of this stream, let's stick to the Dracula, which is a more standard theme. So then comes the GCMH mode, which is basically a way, which is a package that you saw up here. We actually installed in here. We tell this straight, okay, install this package, and this this mode or this this package is basically to tweak garbage collection strategy, and it has a strategy or an algorithm to set and trigger garbage collection calls to sweep the memory. I also set this variable to silent all native compilation warnings. From Emacs 28, there is a feature called native compilation, which compiles your eLisp code into native code, basically into object files, the same output you get if you compile C. It's a really, really amazing technology that they added to Emacs, and it improves the speed so much. I just silence all the warnings because it cannot I think it cannot compile all eLisp code in the best way. I also disable Emacs log files for now, or for I just disabled them because I don't like the log files polluting all my directories and everything. I also disable the autosave files. They're similar. It's not autosave feature of the editor that it will save, for example, your file every, for example, I don't know, 30 seconds. It's not related to that. Autosave file is a different thing, and I just turned it off. There's also VC follow symlinks, which is basically means, okay, Emacs, do not ask if I open up a file that is a symlink to another file. Do not ask what to do. Just go through the link. Because by default, Emacs will ask you what to do. Go to the link or just show the actual content of the link, which is the address of the actual file. I just say, okay, go to the original file. I also disable the startup screen. The screen you see here, if I don't disable it, you see the default Emacs startup screen, which is actually rather slow to load, so I disable it, and it's not useful for me. I also ask Emacs, please don't use dialog boxes, so the GUI dialog boxes, don't use them. Just use the Minibuffer in here and the echo area, and just ask questions in here, and I will answer them using my keyboard. Don't use dialog box for questions, so I don't want to do anything with the GUI. Also, don't ring. So Emacs has this way of sometimes packages can called the ring bell function of Emacs, and to do something. So some packages maybe do some playing some sound or anything, and I'm just saying, okay, don't do this ever. Then I have this package. It's a from external package called execpath from shell, which basically copies your path variable from your default shell. It's rather useful for finding, for example, language server binaries. So if you want to, for example, run Rust Analyzer or Go PLS, and they are in your path, if you launch Emacs as a GUI application, it will not inherit your default path of your shell. So you need a way to copy that. If you launch Emacs in terminal mode, of course, there is no problem, and we can skip this part, but most people run Emacs as a GUI program, so we need this. I also set the custom file to a rather discarded file in my Git ignore, because there is this notion of custom variables, which I actually don't like that much in Emacs. They're basically customization variables that each package can define, or each file can define, and you can set them. And Emacs has this UI of setting custom variables. Instead of doing them in a script, you do actually use a UI to set those custom variables, and then it will append those settings, those custom values, in your initial script. And I don't like that, so I just disable this behavior by changing the custom file. I'm saying, okay, if you want to do some custom variables and custom values, just put them in this custom.el file in my user Emacs directory, and I ignore this in my git ignore, because I will do everything I want in this script, and that's it. Def alias is also a really nice one. I'm not going to go into so deep about def alias, but basically def alias, if we take a look at the documentation, def alias will basically change the definition of a symbol to some other definition. So if you have a symbol that a function is bound to it, like yes or no p, I'm changing that definition to y or np. Basically, it means that I'm saying Emacs, okay, if you want to ask a yes or no question, instead of prompting me for word yes or word no, prompt me for character y or character n, which is a rather for just convenience. There is echo keystrokes. So if you take a look at down here, let me zoom in a bit. And if I do, actually maybe if I can increase the font size a bit. So let's make this 20. This is beautiness of Emacs. I just reevaluate this, and I have this function called reload font, and it will get bigger. And let me just check the recording. Okay, I think it's now good. Okay, so if I come down again in here, if I do some key, for example Control X, you see that it echoed my Control X in here. This is basically controlled by this value, the amount of time before Emacs shows this to the user. I think the default value is actually 1, which means 1 second, and I'm making this faster. There's also which key mode, which is really helpful, especially if you come to Emacs, if you're newly comer to Emacs. It will show you this is which key acting. This is basically a mode that will pop up when you press a key binding, but you don't know how to continue that key binding. So for example, I want to save my file, but I don't know what is the save shortcut. I remember that I did Control X something. So I do Control X, I wait, this will pop up, and this will pop up. I don't know, that there's probably a variable to control the time that it appear, and I look through all these functions and mappings that are followed by Control X. So for example, I see, okay, Control X, Control S means save buffer. So if I now do Control S, it will save my file. I have a rather simple function called edit Emacs, which just opens up this file. Nothing fancy. It just opens up this file. This is the Emacs way of doing, of saying, okay, I want this file, I don't know what OS I'm running on, so I don't know, for example, the path separators. So for example, if you are on Windows, you need to use a backslash. If you are on Linux or Mac, you need to use a slash. I also don't know where actually user has set its user Emacs directory. So by default, it's your home.emacs.d. But nowadays, Emacs can also read your xdg config path, which is in your home.config and then /Emacs. So I also don't know this, but Emacs knows this. So let me evaluate this variable. You see that it's my home.emacs.d. So I'm saying basically I'm looking for this file in this directory. So please just put these paths together and give me an absolute path for this, which will result into this. And I set a global key binding to edit my Emacs. So everywhere I am, every mode, every file, I just do Control-C, EE for edit Emacs, and I get to this function. This is Emacs' way of setting key bindings. There's also this function, which I actually don't know if I use or not, but it's basically a way of getting environment from your OS, or not from your OS, from your process, but also providing a default value. There's also this Hydra thing, which I will elaborate on later. We can skip for now. And we have some functions, so two key bindings. One is for AceWindow package, which I will show you what it does right now. So AceWindow is a package to help you with window movement and window management. So let me zoom out a bit, create a new window. So I have created a new window. These both windows, so these are windows in Emacs, basically splits in Vim, I don't know, some other things in other editors. And you can create them with Control-X2 and Control-X number 3. So if you want to move between them, by default, there is only one function, which is called other window. And if you do this, it's not really deterministic where you end up. But using AceWindow, so I'm mapping the default. So by default, Control-XO is mapped to this other window function, which you have seen. But I change it into AceWindow. So when I do Control-XO, you see that windows become dim. There is a number tagged. Number is above all these windows. So for example, if I now press 4, I end up here. If I do Control-XO, 2, I end up here. And if I do, I can also do commands on Windows. So if I do Control-XO, D for, I don't know, if it was D or K for Control-XO, I actually don't remember AceWindow a lot. There is a way we can close windows. Oh, there was X. So now I've pressed X, and it's basically, if I say, for example, 3, it will close that window. So if I do Control-XO again, and I want to close the number 2. So if I do X2, it will do that for me. Sorry for the inconvenience. So we can continue. Now there is this Buffer package, which is basically a way to manage your open buffers. So if I do Control-XB, I have all these buffers open. So for example, you see these helpful things that we looked, some function definitions. There is our figlet command. We have some straight process. We have the theme we had, and we also have this file. So you can do Control-XK to kill buffers, but if you have large number of buffers, or basically you have a large number of buffers in a project and you just want to kill all buffers related to that project, it would become hard. But if you use Buffer package, Control-X, Control-B, sorry, you go to this management console thing where you can, for example, kill all this section buffers. So for example, all helpful modes, just kill them using K. All shell mode, kill them. really simple. Or this theme buffer we have, kill it. It's rather simple. I also unset the Control Z key, which is a default key for minimizing Emacs. I really don't use it, and sometimes I press it wrong, so it minimizes Emacs. It brings some inconvenience to my Emacs experience. Sorry again. So we have also some hook for dir-et mode. So what is dir-et or dir-et? Dir-et is Emacs file manager. It's a really powerful file manager. But what I added this here is a key binding for dir-et. This function is a key binding for this function, which basically, let me show you how it acts. So if I go to my dir-et buffer, let's not change in here, so because all the files are important. But if I go, for example, into that files, if I do Control-C, Control-E, you see it says, okay, press Control-C, Control-C when finished. Now in here, I can change these like a normal text buffer. Let me, for example, change this file to this. And if I do Control-C, Control-C, it will rename this file on my disk. So if I can show you in here, ls, ls-al, this is eShell. I will elaborate on this later as well. But you see that it really renamed this. I can bring that to what it was. I could actually use, let me see, what did I change? Yes, I don't want to do this. Okay. Let's go back to our init file. So it's that way of changing files in a really smart way. Just editing a text buffer and it will apply changes to disk. It's rather really smart way. I'm also changing default package or default functions that handle help. So Emacs has this help system. So if you do Control-H, let the H key kick in, there are many things you can ask for help. Most of the times you want to see what a key will trigger what function, or you want to see what function function description. So for example, if you do Control-HF, you'll see all the functions you have. So we actually looked it up in here with the map car function. But the default way, let me show you the default describe function. And if I do map car, you see it's a shorter version. So if you put them, let's put them together, there is helpful. Okay, so this is the default help buffer of Emacs, and this is helpful package. You see there are more data about this function. Also, if there is a key binding map to it, it will show that key binding as well in here. So for example, let's do let's close these two and let's compare that for edit Emacs function that I know I have some keys. It will show this in here, but the way helpful does it, it's just rather more convenient. You see, it's a more beautiful way of saying. Also shows you the source code, which is rather nice. But the thing I'm doing in here is rather interesting. So instead of telling Emacs exactly what key I want to bind these, so for example, I could just write this Control-HK in here, Control-HF in here, and Control-HV. I use this expression in here, or this special form, I guess, which is basically telling Emacs, okay, I want a global key binding for this function, but I'm not going to tell you what keys to do the binding. Instead, go into the global key map, look for this function, and map all keys that points to this function, to this. So basically replace all key bindings pointing to this with this. It's a really smart way and short way to tell Emacs what you want to do. Then I have this simple expression to add the themes directory to my load path, so it will know the themes. I do a simple hack to I need to go a bit faster. I do a simple hack, def advice. Advices are something in Emacs. You can basically patch a function without changing its source code to do some stuff when before that function is called, or before that function, after that function, or when this function is being called. So basically a way of patching functions without changing the source code. So for example, I'm not changing the load theme source code, but I'm saying before this load theme function, please disable all other loaded themes. So this variable loads all the themes that are loaded, a list of themes that are loaded. So for example, Doom Dracula, which is loaded now. And I'm saying, okay, call this function disable theme, which will disable a given theme on all enabled themes. So Emacs has this concept that you can propagate or stack themes on top of each other. And I don't like this, especially if I'm switching themes all the time, and I do this a lot. Sometimes themes get mixed up and colors are not that beautiful anymore. So I just want one theme available at a time. Then I use the default load theme of Emacs with my custom Amirza theme variable, which we defined above. I also set a key binding for that. So Control-C, TT is for load theme. I also have some font settings. So for example, if I'm running on my BenQ monitor on my home, I use this function, which basically changes the font size to 23 and then calls this expression, which, so frame means this OS window that is running Emacs, and I'm setting this frame font to my font concatenated by space and a font size. Normal for my personal MacBook, just I make the font a lot smaller. There's also an interactive function that asks for the font size. I have also this reload font thing, which I use, which will basically reload the frame font. I do some cursor changes. This is the default value, but I have this for sake of documentation, and users can also customize this. So for example, if users prefer a normal horizontal bar or a horizontal line, like other editors, they can opt into that, but I prefer box. I will also enable some mode called global HL line mode, which basically this is the mode that is highlighting the current line I'm in. And there's also this blink cursor mod, which makes the cursor blinking, and I don't like it, so I turn it off. You can turn off mods by passing a negative argument to them. We have now we reach the auto completion section. So if I type here something, you see there is an autocomplete pop-up. Oh, actually you don't see that. That's not good because of the, I'm just sharing this Emacs window. So let me see if I can fix this. So I think it should now be fixed. So if I do set Q, okay, now you see this. You see this autocomplete pop-up. Let me turn off Telegram so I don't get, I don't think actually Mac does notifications when I stream, but it's safer to do so. So you see I can have a autocomplete pop-up. I can do async and get completion based on what I type, like all other editors. And this behavior is happening because of the package called Corfu, which is an auto-completion package. I installed it up here, so there is a section about Corfu in here. So Corfu and Corfu terminal and Corfu prescient, which I will tell you what is a prescient package do. And so I enable it, so make it start automatically. I make the delay of showing the pop-up actually smaller, and I enable it globally. So the mod is globally enabled. It is also configured to automatically activate, so no need to press any key binding. By default, you need to press a key binding, but you can configure it to be automatic. I also enable some extensions of that Corfu. So for example, Corfu history mod, which is basically a mod that, or mode actually, mod I think it's a wrong pronunciation. So mode, Corfu history mode will sort the completions based on your history. Or Corfu echo mode will show the candidate documentation in your echo area. So for example, if I do set queue, you see that it was showing this in the echo area and also shows that in a pop-up window, like other text editors. So pop-up info was that pop-up of the documentation. And if also if we are, unless we are in a graphics environment like this, do Corfu terminal modes. So be compatible with how to draw, pop-up, and other stuff in a terminal environment. Emacs is not just a GUI program, it was actually originally a terminal program or text mode program. The prescient mode is also another algorithm to sort. Prescient is an algorithm to sort basically a list based on some history, and we are using that for Corfu as well. Then we come to the Minibuffer section. Minibuffer is the thing you see here. It's like a buffer, but it's not technically a normal buffer. But it's basically the way of Emacs for asking you, or for interaction with Emacs. So you can, if you do search for files, if you do, I don't know, for example, search for a buffer, all these things are happening in Minibuffer down here. And I will also want to customize that as well. So I do some settings. I also use a package called Vertigo, which is this thing that is showing me all the completion items and let me go through them, also searching them and narrow the results. By default, Emacs is not like this. So if I do turn off this vertical mode, this is what you get from pure Emacs. And if I do tab, it will show me a list of items that I can do. If I do this, it will complete for me. But I do use vertical mode because it's really great and it's really compatible with other Emacs parts. Also, we enable prescient mode for Vertigo as well. We enable vertical mode. There is also this package called consult, which provides functions for Minibuffer. And we use that. There are helper functions. So for example, I can use consult buffer, which will also switch or basically preview buffers. Or there's this consult theme, which will load themes as you go. Rather helpful stuff. There's also this completion style concept, which we will not go through deep, but basically I'm setting this to be orderless. Orderless is also a package that I install in my package list. And it basically means that I can write, for example, I want init and early. I know in early init, EA happens before INI, but this orderless package lets me do these kind of completions as well. I have some stuff for the editor experience of my Emacs. So Emacs purely as a text editor has an experience, and I want to configure that. There is this mode called delete selection mode. So if I I'm selecting a region, so not that much, but for example, I'm selecting this region and I start typing. Nowadays we expect this to happen. So delete the region and replace this with what I'm typing. But this wasn't the default behavior of Emacs. So we need to actually, if you want this behavior, you can turn it on. This is actually the part about Emacs that is really amazing. You can customize every single detail to your needs or to your liking. There's also this, but you see that when I'm on a parenthesis, the matching parenthesis is getting highlighted. And this is because of this, these two lines. So show parent mode, and I also configure the delay to be 0. So if the delay is something other than 0, it will take time for this highlighting to happen, but I want this instantly. Also, we have this line numbers. I'm also configuring line numbers to be relative. Why so? It's really, really useful. So like Vim, if you have, if you can repeat, or rather not repeat, you can, it's actually more smart in Emacs. You can actually pass arguments. So let me we need to talk about a few things. So if we do Control HK, which will ask us to press a key to show what function it is running for that particular key binding. So if I do Control P, it's a function called previous line. It's the normal and standard way you go up, and Control N is for go down or going down. I can actually do this keycast mode line mode. Yes, so you can now see I should have turned it on sooner. So, and let's make the font size a bit bigger and make Emacs window a bit smaller. Okay, I guess it's cool now again. Okay, so you see all the keys I'm pressing in mode line, and I'm doing Control P, Control N. So there is a way of, when you are doing an interactive function or key binding, you can pass arguments to that function. So if I do Control 1, 2, pressing Control and passing, I want to pass a number argument to a function. I press Control, holding Control, and I press 1, 2, which is 12, which means 12, and then I do Control P. It passes that 12 to previous line function. It's basically doing the same thing. If I do previous line and 12 in here, I jump up. And this is a way, for example, I want to edit this line, and I'm in this line, I do Control 13P, and I jump up. So this is actually one of the things about Emacs that is really smart, and that is really that is really why we say Emacs is more a programming language and a runtime. Everything in Emacs experience is written in eLisp. So even Vim is really extensible. NeoVim also is really extensible, but they can never reach Emacs in terms of customizability and extensibility, because most editor functionality in Vim, in NeoVim, are written in the C code. So for example, the code, I'm guessing this, I'm not sure, but I think that is correct. So the command, or the actual code that is the logic of command delete in Vim, is written in the C code, or going up and down, HJKL, are in the C code. But in Emacs, they are all implemented in Emacs Lisp itself. So you can actually see, I guess, yes, you can actually see the source code of the previous line in here. You can see the source code. It's really simple. It's just eLisp. So Emacs is implemented it itself. So, or better said, Emacs is a programming language, which is Emacs Lisp, and a runtime library or a framework, and a UI, which is this, and the editor and other stuff is implemented inside it. It does not mean it is an editor. It's a programming language. I'm also adding this hook to prog mode hook. And so basically saying that for all programming languages, enable this minor mode, this HS minor mode, which is basically a way of Emacs to do folding. So if I do control, follow control and holding control and pressing the single quote, it will toggle this. So I can toggle this. It's rather useful, and it's built into Emacs. There is no need for any package. There's also a nice thing about modes, and I want to tell you, and that is that modes in Emacs are they have some inheritance thing built into them. So for example, all modes related to programming languages, so for example Go mode or Rust mode or PHP mode, they all inherit from this prog mode hook, or from this prog mode. And all modes also have hooks. So when you enable a mode, all modes, this is not a rule, but it's standard, all modes have a hook. When they activate it, they call that hook or that callback. These are just hooks, are just functions. And I'm basically saying add to this hook, prog mode hook. So when prog mode is activated, or anything that inherited from prog mode, which means all programming languages, enable this HS minor mode. I'm also globally setting that key, which was actually more smart to do this in just prog mode hook, but I think I can fix this later. There's also multiple cursors, which you can have, of course. Let's do this in here. If I do control for typing character right arrow, you need to press control and shift and do this. And you see the command down here. And I can go, I can delete stuff and go back. So this is multiple cursors in Emacs if you want them. Of course, you can, I think, map something with your mouse to also do this, because mouse is also a key. So if you see, if I do clicks, this is mouse 1, or this is mouse 3, and this is mouse, I don't know, it should be mouse 2. I don't know what is mouse 2 in my mouse. I have two nice functions, up center and down center, which will basically go half a page up and also recenter my cursor to be at the center of the screen. You see, I'm going up half a page, but my cursor stays the same, which is really useful when just scanning for something. It is the same thing, but with going down. And there's recenter top bottom. I'm basically configuring this function with this variable. I can change this to this. It gets random. So there is this recenter top bottom that is also bound to control L. So, and it does these things. So if when you first press control L, it will go to middle. If you follow it by another control L, it will go to top. Basically just moving your cursor. So middle, top, and I didn't evaluate this for the bottom. So middle, top, bottom. I just want this to be always middle. I'm mapping these to meta and p, so m-p and m-n for these my custom functions. There's also this expand region, or this expand region package, which is really nice. So I have mapped it into control and equal. So if I do this, it will expand my selection. So if I have selected this word or just this character, and if I do control equal, it will expand that to the next semantical meaningful unit, which is a word, or which is, I guess in terms of ELIS, I think it's a symbol. Then inside the parentheses, all the parentheses, inside the parent parentheses, and all the parentheses. And also there is this contract region, which does the opposite. So if I do this, let's do this, it will remove the selection. I also have this mark command. So this set mark command. So that is actually the way you actually have something similar to visual mode. It's not visual mode. The keys are the same. But instead of like other editors, when you want to select something, you hold down shift and you go around. So for example, if I do holding shift and control and I do control P, I am selecting. But I rather prefer this way because it actually also works in terminal mode. So there is this command called setMark command, and the default key binding for that is control space. And when you do that, you see that it says mark set. So then you can move with your normal key binding. You don't need to hold shift and you just select stuff, which is rather useful. There's also this really great package called AV, which is for jumping around. I just use the go to line functionality of this. Let me demonstrate this for you. So if I do control semicolon, you see that it highlighted all lines visible to me, and it lets me jump to each one by pressing 1 or 2 characters. So if I just want to jump to this line, I do ls. Again, if I want to jump to this line, I do jf. It's a really amazing way of jumping to stuff. And there are other variations of this as well. So if I want to, for example, I'm in this line, I want to jump to the S, I probably should have bounded this to but I want to jump to S character, and I jump that like that. So it's basically jumping around. I have some org mode things I will skip now because I want to do another video specifically on org mode, so I will skip them. I have two packages related to Git. So first one is the Git Gutter package, which is installed using a straight, and that's present in the list of packages. And you see that it basically just shows the Git changes in the gutter or area, or basically alongside the line numbers. I also have the Magit package, which I also want to do a video on, which is the best Git client ever. It's just the best. There's no way that something has a better Git client than Magit. It's just amazing. Emacs has an internal package called project for doing some project related stuff. So basically what the project means, it means a Git repository or other version controls repository. And it provides some functionality based on that. So for example, there is a project find file. So find file not in the current directory, but in all projects files. So if I do control, so and I mapped that into control XPF, and you see all files in my .files project. This is a time, I guess it's good for telling you what a Hydra is. So you have seen that it was actually the first package that I installed for my Emacs. And Hydra means to basically the thing that Hydra does is actually present in default Emacs, which is the concept of a key map. So Emacs does not have a single key map. So key map means a place where you can actually see visualize that as a hash map that maps key chords or key bindings to functions. That's a key map. And Emacs has multiple key maps. So it has a global key map. Each minor mode that you activate has a key map. Each major mode, that is basically your file type. For example, this is EL. So Emacs Lisp major mode has a key map. So Emacs has multiple key maps active. And you can create your own key maps, and you can bind keys to those key maps. So for example, I can create a key map for my functionality and map a key to launch that key map, or to basically say, for example, if I do have these project related functions or key mappings, I map them to another parent key mapping, which will be then followed by those other things. This is basically what Hydra does for us in a short and concise way with good representation. So you create a Hydra, you put some keys in here. So if I'm in my Hydra, if I press F, I go to project find file. This is the documentation. P for switching projects, B for project buffers, and project compile. And I map this Hydra that I created to this Control X P. So if I now do Control X P, you see that it prompts me with all the keys I can do. This is actually the goodness of Hydra. I don't think the default behavior does this. So this is basically what Hydra does for me, helping me, and I can actually follow this so fast. I don't really need to look into it, but it's rather helpful to have them, especially for longer or bigger Hydras. So this is how Hydra helped me organize my key bindings. So there is also, I really like this part. So this part is about programming. And I create a variable in here called Amireza Programming Hydra Heads. It's an empty list for now. And for the sake of argument, we should know that each one of these is called a Hydra head. So these are, a Hydra has multiple heads. This is the same thing. So it has, this Hydra has multiple heads. So there's a programming Hydra I will eventually create. For now, its heads are, I'm storing them in a variable, and its heads are just an empty list for now. So let's come down for programming, and the section is diagnostics. So I add to list to my Hydra heads, programming Hydra heads, I add 3 heads for going to next error, previous error, and also searching through errors. So this is, you see the consult package kicking in, which is amazing. And also there is this package called FlyMake, which is also built into Emacs. And it's basically a way of Emacs to doing diagnostics or errors in one buffer. And it can hook into LSP for errors. So this is how the IDE feeling is going to be built. So the LSP gets errors from the LSP server, the LSP client, which is Iglot, gets errors from the LSP server. Then it will fed them to FlyMake package, and FlyMake package will let me go through them and navigate between them. So there's also Emacs built-in functionality for jumping around for definitions, and the package is called xref, and there is this xref find definitions, go back and find references. And also these will also be hooked into LSP. So when I map them in for meta dot and meta comma, which is actually, I think, the default key binding as well, and meta r for find references. And LSP will also hook into these. So for example, when you do xref find definitions, it's just a function that is that you can customize the definition of it. So it actually calls another function, and Iglot comes in, provide the definition implementation of this. So you can see this like an interface. So you are mapping this key to an interface, and the implementation of this interface can differ for each config or for each package. Iglot kicks in, change this definition of this function for buffers that you have Iglot enabled, and you can jump to definitions based on the LSP. There's also things about documentation. So you see that I have some documentation showing this at the bottom. So this is LDoc kicking in. It's another Emacs built-in package that does show the documentation in echo area, also can show the documentation in another buffer. And I use that, and I also add that to my programming Hydra, which I actually deleted this function, which I actually should fix this. And it's not toggling anymore, it's just LDoc. And I enable this globally. So we also have LSP, which is Iglot, aka Iglot, And if I'm on Emacs 29, I don't need to install it, otherwise install it. For all programming modes, try to do eglot. If I have the language server configured, if eglot can do that language, just do it, otherwise don't do anything. And I have multiple heads for my programming Hydra. I still have not defined my programming Hydra. And I have all these keys. So for example, D for LDoc, capital D for find definitions. I don't use this, of course, I don't use this, I use metadot. Find references, find implementations, rename, and format. We also do this simple configuration for rustic package, which are used for Rust, and the default is LSP mode. I change it to eglot. And finally, I define it. So you see that I'm actually using a custom function. Instead of def hydra, I'm saying amireza def hydra, which is a basic wrapping around the def hydra itself to be able to pass a list instead of need to expand the list. It's just a technical thing. It's not important. It's basically a hydra, nothing more. And for all programming hydras, so you remember that I said that there is kind of an inheritance going on. There's kind of an inheritance going on that between modes, and you can have that inheritance for key maps as well. So prog mode map also will be inherited for all other modes that inherits from them. And I map that to control space. So it gives me a feeling of context menu. So if I do control space in here, I get all of this. Of course, Emacs this does not have a LSP, so maybe I need to customize this for Emacs list, but it's a really nice thing to just do one key and then you can do this. Also, there is control CM for major mode, but I actually like the control space better. And this is the reason I changed. So control space by default is the key binding for setting a mark, and I mapped that to control Q. If you remember, that's the reason, because I like this better. And this is also beautiful. So for Golang, I want a specific Hydra head added to my Hydra. So I have my programming Hydra and I append to that list. So this is a list. I am appending to it, creating a new list, and I'm appending this one. And this is a command from another package. So there's a package called go tag, which will add a struct tags to a struct. And I want that for Golang. And for Go mode hook, I add these to Go mode, and it will override the prog mode. So if I'm in a Go file and do control space, I get this behavior as well. Same thing for JSON. Of course, JSON is not a prog mode, so I need to define it from scratch. I have mostly printing stuff or formatting stuff. And same stuff in here. I have workspaces, which is a rather nice thing. They are like i3 workspaces or any window manager if you have used, or any desktop environment basically. They hold windows, buffers, etc. And you can also save or reload your session. So for example, I can move to another workspace. So let's call that W2, and I'm in another workspace. I can go back to the first one. And you can have multiple buffers in each one, and it's a way of organizing and having single Emacs session, but with multiple projects open and everything, and easily switch between them. There's also simple macOS setting to map the command key to meta. I don't like to map super key in my Emacs. I think super key is just for operating system. It's not for Emacs. Then we come to this section about eShell. I actually want to do another video on eShell because it's really amazing. So I'm going to skip this part and end this video. I'm going to do another video on eShell because it's really amazing and it needs its own video. So I think that's good for this video. It was actually longer than I expected, really long, but I really like talking about the configurations and the tools and especially the editors, I guess. I think they are really probably the most important part of a developer day, so we need to really know them and love them, and how we should know how to create our own tools. Thank you for watching. I try to make my channel active again, so if you subscribe and like this video, and comments and put comments for me, it's really good and I appreciate it. Thank you very much, and until the next video, goodbye.